been. Well, there is a new report from the Alan Turing Institute, Adding Fuel to the Fire, AI Information Threats and Crisis Events, which is out now, from the Southport riots in 2024 to the Israel-Iran conflict in 2025. A series of major crisis events, they say, have highlighted the damage that a polluted online information ecosystem can cause to public safety and national security. While Broderick James McDonald is a fellow at the Alan Turing Institute who researches the national security threats of these emerging technologies. Broderick, thanks so much for joining us this morning. When you talk about, or when your institute talks about a polluted online information ecosystem, what do you mean by that?
Firstly, great to be here, and thanks for covering this. When we talk about the polluted information ecosystem and these AI information threats, what we're really talking about is AI-powered disinformation that is adding fuel to the fire of existing crises. And we see this in Belfast, we see this in Southport, but we also see it around the world, as we write about, and as you mentioned just before, we see it in interstate conflict, in civil wars, in riots, right after terrorist attacks, all of these kind of security events. And in the UK context in particular, we're especially worried about riots and the kind of intercommunal violence that can come after that based off of false information, right? As we've seen in Belfast or in Southport. It's really, a massive threat that we're just at the moment not prepared to tackle with the existing toolkit we have, both in government and industry, law enforcement, really across the board.
I mean, something that I saw in Belfast this week is quite a small version of this and some of the things you're talking about, Broderick, but nonetheless, it had a real effect, was the creation using AI interfaces, very simply, very quickly, of basically lists, images that were being spread around WhatsApp groups in the city, which suggested, and it looked very, very official, that basically different streets would be closed down at different times, telling people to avoid those streets at those times, telling businesses to close early in those places, and emblazoned along the bottom, it said no exceptions. And honestly, if you looked at it for 30 seconds or a minute, you would just think this was some form of official communication. Now, in fact, this was not true, and they were being used as a means of terrorizing people. But the effect was real. Belfast shut down.
Absolutely. And this is sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we see from information threats. It can take the form of the kind of posters that you're speaking about. And I think that those are particularly concerning when it is highly convincing, that it looks perhaps like an official communication from a public official, even when it's not. It's from an activist who has no authority to make those kind of claims. But also the speed at which those kind of pieces of propaganda can be put out rapidly after an event like this. I think that's even on the sort of softer side of what we're worried about. What we actually worry the most about right now is the potential for things like deep fakes to actually completely change the information environment, whether that be a deepfake of Sadiq Khan back in 2023 around Remembrance Day. There was a deepfake audio clip of him supposedly canceling Remembrance Day. Of course, he did nothing of the sort. But this actually, convinced hundreds of people who came out into the streets and protested, rioted in some cases. There was 120 arrests. I think 9 police officers were injured and 2 of them even hospitalized. So, you can see through these kind of AI disinformation events that this is not theoretical or abstract long-term risk. This is something that is already creating violence in our streets right now.
Do you think that the British government, let's use them for the sake of argument, are they sufficiently cognizant of the sort of systemic risks that you're talking about? And if they are they doing enough about it?
I think we've come a long way. In fact, as part of the report that we published through CETaS at the Alan Turing Institute, we brought together stakeholders from government and industry, from civil society, all different sides to help tackle this issue at the procedural level. And that's one piece of it, certainly. I think government had a ways to go in terms of making sure that coordination was happening between all of the different parts of the government that work on this, which is a real challenge, right? There's a lot of different moving parts that feed into this, from law enforcement, the Home Office, to AC and DCIT. It's really making sure that everybody is on the same page and pulling in the same direction. But I think that work is being done and is happening right now. I think there's also work to be done, working with both the labs and civil society. One of the things that we recommend as a sort of very easy and worthwhile fix is making sure that some of these chatbots, be that Grok in this case, but others as well, don't spew misinformation in the hours and minutes after the attack. Oftentimes what we see is that they will rely on what is essentially data poisoning, which is poor quality sources from around the internet when there's there's a dearth of information about these events. And so any source that you pick up in that environment has a real impact on what the model is going to say is the reality or the ground truth. And so we really try to recommend that models and AI labs implement what is usually called data hygiene, making sure that the information the models are drawing on to give that response back to users is really a accurate source. So something from the BBC or another trusted media organization. That's really the way to make sure that the results are accurate.
Broderick James McDonald there, fellow at the Alan Turing Institute, who've written this report about something that is going to continue to rock our politics, and we are just in the foothills of it.